Troll 2 may have been the single worst movie that I have ever seen. It's possible that it is the worst movie ever made. It's one of those movies that's so unbelievably bad, it's iconic almost immediately. Even the small details in Troll 2 seem to make no sense, like the freckles on this woman's face in the opening scene that appear to be drawn on with Sharpie. This isn't the only decision in Troll 2 that was either horribly misguided or absolutely brilliant, and there is no in-between of those two things. It begs the question, was all of this on purpose? Are the garish, overdone performances intentional?
He was sweating chlorophyll green.
Green?
That's right. The color of the goblins.
Were the actors told to talk like they were presenting in a health class video about the reproductive system?
Try to go to sleep. We're going on a vacation tomorrow. A month in the country will do us all good.
And if a movie is so bad it ends up being enjoyable, does that make it a good movie? What if that was the point from the beginning? Does that make you a good writer? What about a good director? What even makes a bad movie anyway? If it's still fun to watch, it isn't really bad. And let me tell you, Troll 2 is fun to watch. It is perfect to pull out for your Halloween gathering to lighten the mood. It may be the funniest bad movie that there is. So why do we as viewers even like bad movies? What is it about these misguided train wrecks of poorly spent money that captures our attention so well, that's so entertaining? I'm going to talk about all this and more in this week's movie analysis. I'm Basil, and this is Failing Film School. Now, the best bad movie watching experience is to be had with a group of friends. But if you're a mentally unstable, borderline alcoholic, wannabe YouTuber like myself, you can have just as good of a time getting drunk on your couch, questioning all your life choices, and routinely scaring yourself with the image of the only goblin who has eyes for some reason. Now, you may be wondering, Basil, you keep referencing Troll 2. Do I need to see the first Troll movie to understand this one? And of course you don't. Troll 1 was at least half an attempt to make a decent movie. It's still terrible, and it definitely spawned this one to be just as terrible, but you do not need to watch Troll 1. I wouldn't even bother watching the first Troll movie. It's really not nearly as fun as this. You may have heard me earlier as I mentioned goblins, and if you haven't been drinking any lead paint recently, you may have thought to yourself that goblins must be a side character in this Troll movie. And you're wrong. Goblins are in fact a main character in Troll 2. In fact, goblins are such a main character that trolls are not a character at all. The word troll is only mentioned in one place in the movie Troll, and that place is the title. At no point could the writers think of a place to even bring troll up in the dialogue. And it's things like this that make it pretty obvious that this movie was greenlit as a terrible movie from the very beginning. I mean, with lines like this,
Peter was a courageous boy, but that dawn, he could feel fear stick to his skin like dew on leaves.
and deliveries like this,
They're eating her! And then they're going to eat me! Oh my God!
it's pretty much impossible to say any other way. But I still like to think that some producer out there thought at some point that maybe they had half a chance to make a decent movie when they started filming this thing. I think that's what makes these movies fun to watch. I think the question of how somebody could have possibly made these decisions is half the fun of a bad movie. We can relate to it. We can relate to making terrible decisions. We can see that if we were acting in this movie ourselves, we probably could do no better. It's like watching America's Funniest Home Videos. Sure, it's fun to see a little baby laugh, but we really want to see some guy get hit in the nuts with a wiffle ball bat.
It's the dumbest thing ever. If you do something dumb, they all laugh at you.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, go.
I think taking leisure in other people's failure and in failure itself will always be a form of fun and entertainment for human beings. It makes us feel a little bit less sad and alone. And it's also just greatly entertaining to watch a group of people act like they're people that have forgotten how to be people and are still trying to act like people, like in what might be the most iconic death scene of all time.
Oh my God, what's happening to her? And why can't I move? There must be a logical reason all of this.
Normally I title this section of the video likes and dislikes, but with a movie like this, those two things kind of blend together after a little while. And I think that is another part of what makes watching a bad movie so fun. You can see something absolutely ridiculous, something that would totally take you out of a good movie, and only see the funny part of this misguided attempt to make a movie. Anyway, today I've decided to be charitable and label all of my notes on this movie as likes. Starting with what I already mentioned, the Sharpie on freckles. I cannot imagine what possibly could have gone through someone's mind to do this to a person in an honest attempt to make this movie better. It's one of those things that was so obviously done to jar the audience to make this movie bad. I mean, look at her. Why does she even need freckles? She looks completely insane. Number 2 is this masterclass in child discipline. It might be one of the best misdirects in movie history.
Do you see this writing? Do you know what it means? Hospitality. And you can't piss on hospitality. I won't allow it!
What are you going to do to me, Daddy?
Tighten my belt by one loop so I don't feel hunger pains. And your sister and mother will have to do likewise. Okay, Joshua, you want to get rough with me? You want to show me that you don't like the choice of this house for our vacation by going on a hunger strike? Well, I'll accept the challenge. But just remember, when I was your age, I really did suffer from hunger. We'll see who gets through this. But just remember, I've got more practice than you. I'll see you tomorrow.
Really, it speaks for itself. I mean, how can you not love the line, "You don't piss on hospitality"? Number 3, no one in Troll 2 ever actually takes a bite out of anything. In multiple instances in this movie, characters canonically have to eat something so that they may be turned into vegetables so that the vegetarian goblins will eat them. Because a big plot point for the goblins is that they're a vegetarian. But we'll get back to that later. In this movie, there are several points when characters go to eat something and take the most obviously fake bites I've ever seen. It makes me wonder if at any point during the entire duration of the filming of this movie, if they had any real food on set other than pop. Again, we'll get into the popcorn later. The only thing that you can assume, other than that, this is just another quirk of the movie that they did to make it look terrible, is that they never fed the actors through their 8 and 10 hour shooting days. Number 4, the performance of this woman.
You will be punished for this.
No. Please, ma'am, I beg you.
The Witch of Nilbog. She lives in the forest and she is the leader of the goblins in this movie. And throughout this movie, she really gave it everything she had.
Allow me to introduce myself. I am Credence Leonor Gilgul of ancient Druid origins. My ancestors came from Stonehenge.
You could almost believe that this performance would have been good had it been done on a stage at a local theater, rather than out behind a movie screen. When you're on stage, your reactions and actions have to be hyper-expressive, both in your vocals and in the expressions on your face. You're so far away from the audience that you have to be hyper-expressive so that they can see any emotion at all. But in a movie, this just comes across as completely insane.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mom, I'm going for a walk.
Hello, beautiful.
Hi.
She is very appetizing,
Appetizing?
provocative. I thought you might enjoy one of my ancient recipes. It's a traditional dish in these parts.
Oh, but you shouldn't have gone to so much trouble.
No trouble. Really.
And it's one of the most unhinged performances I've ever seen. It's also one of my favorite parts of this movie. In every scene, this woman gives everything she has to the character, and credit to her for that. And lastly, we have the corn scene.
Do you like it? Shall we eat it together?
What kind of show is this?
For what might make one of the most insane movie scenes I have ever seen, we have the corn scene. And I'll just let it speak for itself.
matter? Aren't you hungry?
Actually, I like popcorn.
Well, no problem. All we have to do is heat it up.
Craziest part about this scene is it seems to have almost nothing to do with the plot of the movie. It just kinda is there. It feels like something that they shot before the movie was ever even written, and then they realized they forgot to write it into the movie, so they just put it into a spot. The witch doesn't even stick around to take the boy she's trying to sleep with. She just leaves him covered in popcorn.
No more. No more popcorn.
It makes no sense, but it's fantastic, and it's one of the things that I will always love about Troll 2. So what was the point of this endeavor? I really wish that I could look you in the eye and tell you that I believed in my heart that Troll 2 was supposed to be a good movie. I think that makes for a better YouTube video. But unfortunately, it's far too obvious that Troll 2 from the very beginning was supposed to be terrible. They looked at the original Troll, they said this is a bad movie. You know what would be funny? Making a sequel that's even worse. And as much as I love watching it, I'm just a little disappointed with that. I would love to sit here and talk about the remnants of a theme that's anti-vegetarian because the villains of this movie are exclusively vegetarian and they're trying to take some stance against people who don't like meat eaters. But I can't. I think they thought of the most ridiculous thing that they could, and that was a group of goblins in a movie called Troll that turn people into plants so that they can eat their plant-based bodies.
They're eating her! And then they're going to eat me!
I would be reaching if I told you that this movie was anything other than an attempt to make you laugh at all of the insane bad choices. But to that end, this movie succeeds. Watching this movie with a group of friends is a great time, if you have the friends to watch it with. And I highly recommend it for your Halloween party this year. And if you do watch it, or you've already seen it, let me know what you thought about it in the comments. Let me know if I missed anything. And even though I think that this was an intentional attempt to make a bad movie, that doesn't mean I can score it well. Considering it takes almost no effort to write and produce a movie this bad, I can't possibly look at it as anything other than a half-hearted attempt to make a bad movie that turned out to be one of the most fun movies I've ever seen. Starting the failure score off with the plot of Troll 2 may actually be its strongest point. It's honestly relatively coherent and fast-moving. Most of the plot points are well summed up. The only thing I don't like about it is the ending, and I'll touch more on that in a little bit. The plot gets a 4 out of 10. In contrast to the plot, the writing in this movie is definitely the worst part about it. I honestly don't understand how a writer could come up with dialogue so unnatural.
Grandpa Seth has been gone for more than 6 months now. You were at the funeral, and I know it was very difficult for you. It was also very difficult for your father, and for Holly, and for me, his daughter. He was an amazing man. Grandpa Seth has remained in all our hearts, but you must banish him from your mind.
Even though this was their goal, I still think it's easier to write a bad script than it is to write a good script. It gets a 0 out of 10. The cinematography is another easy 0 out of 10. It honestly doesn't go wrong very often, but when it does go wrong, it goes extremely wrong. Noting, in particular, the scene in the car, where it appears as though the cameraman was just sitting on the center console, flipping back and forth between people during the conversation. Trying to piece together a theme for Troll 2 is a pretty useless endeavor. For the interest of keeping the scores consistent, I've decided to reach and piece something together anyway. I like to think that the thesis of this film was that vegetarians and vegans are assholes and hypocrites. I don't know why this movie was so intent on making its villains so anti-meat eaters. It is a pretty funny portion of the film, and I love to watch them turn people into plants and then eat them anyway. We also have a little bit of a hero motif. The son, Joshua, is obviously the chosen one, and he has the power to speak to the dead people, and often he's the only one that can see the goblin. He has to convince everybody by the end of the movie to stand up for themselves, to save them. If it wasn't for him, the whole family would have been dead easily. There's something there, but it isn't much, and I think for the most part it was an accident. I'll be nice and give it a 3 out of 10. Finally, the characters. There really isn't much to say here because it's difficult to develop characters that are so poorly written in the first place. I'm not emotionally attached to anybody, nor was I supposed to be. There's no real reason to shit on the characters here. It gets a 1 out of 10. And before I total up the scores and give you the final score for this movie, I want to talk about one more thing, and spoiler alert for the ending of the movie if you still haven't seen it. The only thing that I can genuinely sum up as a dislike in this movie is the fact that in the end of it, it seems as though everyone died anyway. The goblins came back to the house after they destroyed the magical stone of Stonehenge. So none of it meant anything. They could have just gone to Nilbog and been eaten by the goblins anyway. They made this weird decision to just turn the mom into a goblin in the final scene of the movie and end it on the terrified face of Joshua, who is about to be eaten alive by goblins. Anyway, all totaled up, Troll 2 gets a record low 1.5 out of 10. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to hit like and subscribe, and let me know what I should do for my next video.
Flesh! And by flesh, I mean all that stinking, disgusting meat. Hamburgers! Steaks! The steak sausages! And hot dogs! Sold by the side of the road!